Welcome to Spooky History. If this was a monetized channel, we'd definitely be losing it for this one, as we take a look at a bit of bow chicka wow woo! That's right, today's episode is on ghost sex, more commonly known as spectrophilia. And considering the topic, take this as a general content warning for discussion of consensual and non-consensual sexual activity. They are cunning in wickedness, long to do harm, and are always original in their mischief. They alter the senses, pollute the emotions, upset those who are awake, and disturb those who are asleep by means of dreams. They bring diseases, raise storms, transform themselves into angels of light, and always carry hell with them. They seek to be in control of those who are good and harass them as much as they possibly can. They are given to selected people to torment them, and they are always lying in ambush to effect a person's destruction. Too dramatic for you? These ghosts not Patrick Swayze enough? Technically, spectrophilia is now considered a fetish or paraphilia, which is the umbrella term for a sexual perversion of which there are many different types, from harmlessly odd to full-scale illegal, whether rooted psychologically or neurologically. But first, fun fact. Spectrophilia technically has two definitions: a sexual arousal from reflections in mirrors, and a sexual attraction or sexual encounter between a living human and a paranormal entity, for instance a ghost, spirit or demon. Shock horror, we'll be discussing the latter. But if you are hoping for 20 minutes filth on things that go bump in the night, a quick Google search should no doubt give you all the paranormal porn you want. This video mainly focuses on a time when people at least had an excuse for not knowing any better, with particular emphasis on that original date from hell, incubus. Taken from the Latin incubare, to lie upon. Succubus, from the Latin succubare, to lie beneath. Clearly not big readers of the Kama Sutra then. It's a myth older than the hills, with variations worldwide including Arabian, the jinns, Greek, the satyrs, Hindu, the boots, Celtic, the sirens and duzai, who impregnated female humans and animals, Zanzibar, the Popobawa, a demonic sodomizer, and of course present-day ET abductions. By general definition, an incubi has sexual relations, whether consensual or non-consensual, with a woman who is either asleep or awake, sometimes begetting offspring. It seems wives were often a favourite target, just to compound the error by adding adultery to the list. But traditionally, an incubus led to serious deterioration of health. Earliest records date back to Mesopotamia 2400 BC, featuring incubus Lilu and succubus Lilitu, demons who seduced women and men in their sleep. These records also mention incubi Urdu Lili and succubi Ardat Lili, originally known as storm demons before being rewritten as night spirits. In the early 500s AD, St. Augustine wrote, "It is widely credited, and such belief is confirmed by the direct or indirect testimony of thoroughly trustworthy people, that sylvans or fauns, commonly called incubi, have frequently molested women, sought and obtained from coition. There are even demons, whom the Gauls call douces, or elves, who very regularly indulge in those unclean practices. The fact is testified by so many and such weighty authorities that it were impudent to doubt it." According to the Malleus Maleficarum, one of the greatest authorities on dark forces and witchcraft in 1486, the demon of fornication is called Asmodeus, and in Jewish biblical texts, Adam's first wife, Lilith, is famously known as a succubus, along with three other demonic queens, Aisheth, Agrat Bat Malat, and Naamah. But you'd have to be pretty enthusiastic, lads, because according to folklore, the privy parts of a succubi feel like you're plunging into a pit of ice, which could also be a sign you're a selfish lover and not putting in the upfront work, gentlemen. But sure, let's go with demons. Theologians and philosophers have debated these particulars ever since the 1st century, and no universal agreement was ever reached on whether, for instance, demons feel genuine lust and passion if the devil's power rests in the loins and navel, and it is clear they exercise a lot of control over people through the lasciviousness of the flesh. It's been argued incubi and succubi are not pure evil, but foul spirits or former angels who fell from the lowest heavenly rank who practice this kind of sexual filthiness. Whereas Dionysus says they have a natural raging madness, a mindless lust and a shameless imagination, arrogance, envy and anger. The Malleus Maleficarum, which, spoiler alert, frequently contradicts itself, stresses The reason evil spirits turn themselves into incubi or succubi is not for the sake of gaining or conferring pleasure, because a spirit does not have flesh and bones. The most potent reason is this: to harm a person twice over, that is, in body and soul, through the vice of lasciviousness, so that there may come into being people who are more inclined to all vices. Another debate: did they have any physical form at all? In his essay, Demonology, King James VI suggested corpses undergo demonic possession, rising from the dead, nudge nudge wink wink, with clearly only one thing on their mind. According to 17th century Franciscan priest Sinistraris, demoniality, on the contrary, is copulation with a corpse, a senseless and motionless corpse, which is but accidentally moved through the power of a demon. The debate went further. Could incubi and succubi beget offspring of their own? Well, in Christian texts, most demons are either sexless or ultimately male, shapeshifting into succubi if collecting sperm from men, then switching gender again to impregnate women as an incubus. For example, in the Testament of Solomon, the king meets Ornias, a shape-shifting demon who likewise switches genders for such kicks. If some are occasionally begotten from demons, it is not from the seed of such demons, nor from their assumed bodies, but from the seed of men, taken for the purpose as when the demon assumes first the form of a woman and afterwards of a man, just so they take the seed of other things for other generating purposes. Malleus Maleficarum, however, argues this doesn't make an incubus the father. Evil spirits have no bodies of their own, and therefore cannot procreate themselves, but they can somehow store away and preserve semen so that its life-giving heat does not evaporate. Not only would these horny devils use astrological predictions to time their impregnations, but earmarked Christmas and Easter days just to piss off God even more. The children thus begotten by incubi are tall, very hardy and bold, very proud and wicked. The idea was further promoted by King James VI in 1599, and subsequently any pregnant woman in a nunnery could look forward to getting burned at the stake. So as theories went, on one hand you've got supernatural offspring, albeit from humans, on the other you've got incubi deserving their own hallmark shelf on Father's Day, and just when you'd think you wouldn't need to worry about protection. These half-human, half-demon critters were called cambions. Geoffrey of Monmouth embellished Merlin as one, but no doubt you could probably name a few contemporary suspects of your own. But of course, mortal man was much too sensible to get mixed up in that sort of thing, at least not on purpose. Nowadays, women do not subject themselves unwillingly, but deliberately, because of their absolutely stinking readiness to do so. Men do not willingly subject themselves to succubi because of the strength of reasoning they have by nature, and which men are superior to women, makes them detest this kind of thing the more. A woman? Enjoying sex? Sacrilege! Cue to the pointing fingers and shouts of witchcraft! It was inevitable. Apparently witches either conjured an incubus to torment innocents, or for demons, sex with witches was nothing but a blank, emotionless formality. Witches are bodily present at nightly vigils and have with the demon a genuine carnal and corporeal connection, and that likewise wizards copulate with the succuba or female demon. It was also suggested that Satan delivered demonic sex buddies to the witch or wizard as part of their contract. The solemn profession being thus performed, each had assigned to himself a devil, called Magistellus or Assistant Master, with whom he retires in private for carnal satisfaction. The said devil being, of course, in the shape of a woman, if the initiated person is a man, in the shape of a man, sometimes of a satyr, sometimes of a buck goat, if it is a woman who has been received a witch. Certainly raises interesting questions about the undead Billy and his relationship to Winnie and Sarah in Hocus Pocus. In 1485, the Inquisitor of Como burned 41 witches, each of whom confessed to having had sexual intercourse with spirits. Though the incubus is always visible to the witch, naturally, because torture's such a good memory jogger, isn't it? But what of hapless innocent victims? Sinistraris alludes to an incubus he witnessed himself. During the mid-1600s in the city of Pavia, Italy, a reputedly devout married woman called Hieronyma was terrorized by a very insistent entity. He kept on worse than ever, pretending to be lovesick, weeping and moaning in order to melt the heart of the lady, even when in company whimpering, after the fashion of lovers, kissing his hand to her, and endeavouring by every means to obtain her embraces. She alone saw and heard him. The more she refused, the more mischievous and violent the entity became, hiding her rosaries, seizing her suckling child from her breast, stripping off her clothes outside of a church. Next, he began to strike her cruelly. Bruises and marks were to be seen on her face, her arms or other parts of her body, which lasted a day or two, then suddenly disappeared. Even extending to poltergeist activity, making food, cutlery and furniture spectacularly appear, then disappear at a dinner party. This apparently went on for years until the disturbances finally stopped. Good thing too, considering the lengths this horny spirit went to. One night that she was lying with her husband, the incubus appeared in his customary shape, vehemently urged his demand, which she resisted as usual. The incubus withdrew in a rage and shortly came back with a large load of those flagstones for roofing houses. With those stones he built around the bed a wall so high that it reached the tester, and that the couple could not leave their bed without using a ladder. So, how to rid yourself of an incubus or succubus? Well, traditionally you had confessions, exorcisms, making the sign of a cross and reciting the Lord's Prayer, simply changing locations, or an all-out excommunication. But there were conflicting theological theories as to how they'd respond to religious intervention. The incubi, whom the Italians called folletti, the Spaniards duendes, the French follets, do not obey the exorcists, have no dread of exorcisms, no reverence for holy things, at the approach of which they are not in the least overawed. I wouldn't know, personally. The evidence has only ever been anecdotal, not that there's any shortage of them, including celebrities such as Lucy Liu and Kesha's 2012 song Supernatural, which is about shagging a ghost. A recent beaut was in 2012 when British woman Amethyst Realm not only went public on TV with her spectrophilia, but claimed she'd had sex with 20 ghosts, was engaged to one and impregnated by another. Ectoplasm everywhere. So is there a market for spectral speed dating, or have we any sane explanations to offer? Actually, we've got a few, though no guarantee which is most likely. Sleep paralysis, for one, when you're awake but still dreaming. Chris French, Professor of Psychology at Goldsmiths College, University of London, and co-author of Anomalistic Psychology Exploring Paranormal Belief and Experience, stated, 20 to 40% of people say they've experienced sleep paralysis. In a smaller percentage of the population, you get associated symptoms that can be very scary. One that's commonly reported is a sense of presence, something or someone in the room with you. You can also get hallucinations where you see dark shadows or monstrous figures. You can get auditory hallucinations, you hear voices, footsteps, and also tactile hallucinations. In most cases, spectrophilia is simply the fantasy of the actual sexual relations and not the actual act, though the results may be delusion. Others in the field of psychology suggest it's a misinterpretation of an underlying condition, such as the classic old hag syndrome, coupled with chronic conditions, grief, dissociative disorders, or religious beliefs. Even the Malleus Maleficarum acknowledged over-imagination, blaming stomach diseases for hallucinations, or that fantasies were conjured by the devil himself. Women received a lot of blame too, but shockingly sexist as that medieval text seems, there may be an argument that some cases of incubi were subconsciously driven by an element of masochism, a paraphilia reportedly prevalent in women. But because I know you're all filthy buggers, I'll fast forward a bit to the 20th century and finish up with the nearest we'll get to a real-life example. You may or may not know of the film The Entity, a 1982 movie based on the novel by Frank Del Felitta. It was inspired by the case of Doris Bither, who in 1974 moved to Braddock Drive, Culver City, California with her 4 sons. Shortly after, she was visited by an old Mexican lady who warned her in no uncertain terms, "You need to get out. I used to live here in this old house, back when it was just a farm and I was a little girl. There was something very evil here. This place is haunted and you need to get out." Or maybe she meant what was really wrong with the house, a structurally unsound building that was condemned twice. Personally, that sounds evil enough to me. Anyway, seems she hadn't long to wait before disturbances began. First, psychokinetic activity and infrequent apparitions, then the attacks started. In short, over the course of some years, she claimed to being repeatedly raped by 3 male ghosts. Her case was investigated by Kerry Gaynor, Dr. Thelma Moss and Dr. Barry Taff, who worked at a paranormal lab in the UCLA campus. After visiting Doris and studying the property, Dr. Taff does not believe the encounter to have been an incubus, but does say, We'll never really know if Doris fit the longitudinal pattern that has emerged in this type of parapsychological research, strongly indicating a link between poltergeist activity and epilepsy seizure-prone individuals, coupled with anomalistic electromagnetic geomagnetic environments. Alright, Dr. Taff, you ever heard of a comma? He regrets not having been able to take full neurological history of Doris Bither, and is adamant a great deal of misinformation has been spread about the case and of the numbers of people working on it, but he still had no doubts paranormal activity was afoot. Her sons were interviewed by paranormal researcher Javier Ortega, initially a skeptic, now hardcore believer. There was a time when one of the children was slapped by an unseen hand during the middle of the night. Another story involves one of the boys bumping into an invisible person in the hallway. They all experienced something in that house, something that was paranormal. Maybe it would be worth bearing in mind another little factoid, that Doris Bither was very cagey regarding any information of her background, even refusing to reveal her true age. And years later, her sons revealed that as a teenager, she was kicked out by her family due to her wild nature. Not to mention her later involvement with Ouija boards and seances, combined with drugs and alcohol. In the meantime, hug your warm partner close, be thankful for their pulse and make sure they protect you, lest those icy fingers creep up more than just your spine. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to give us a like on Facebook, a sub on YouTube, and a follow on Insta and Twitter at SpookyHistShow. If you have any ideas for future topics we can discuss, then leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and please, do have nightmares. Dear God, there are a lot of very difficult to pronounce words in that episode, holy bugger.